Today, we welcome to Global Citizenship Education interview series, Miri Yemini. Miri Yemini is an associate professor of education tenure at Tel Aviv University in Israel with interest in internationalization of education in school and higher education, global citizenship education, and education in conflict-ridden societies. She has also developed a strong research contribution around the involvement of external actors in schools. In addition, Prof. Yemini is an active member of the British Association for International and Comparative Education, Comparative and International Education Society, Comparative Education Society in Europe, and she's also an acting president for the Israeli Comparative Education Society. Professor Yemini has published extensively, among others, in Educational Administration Quarterly, Educational Management, Administration and Leadership, Comparative Education Review, Teaching and Teachers Education, Compare Discourse Studies in the Cultural Politics of Education, Journal of Studies in International Education, Globalisation, Societies and Education, Urban Education, and Educational Review. So it is a pleasure to welcome your voice and your line of work, Miri. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It is a pleasure indeed. So let me begin by saying that your line of work is very interesting and definitely adds value to this important series. We had international scholars here. Our audience is basically scholars, teachers, policymakers, practitioners. And I want, for this reason, dive straight into the first questions, perhaps a straightforward question. And the question is, what is global citizenship and global citizenship education? And what is a global citizen, in your opinion?
Thank you so much. This is the $1 million question, as you obviously know. So many scholars and teachers and policymakers are working hard to conceptualize these contested terms. It all started perhaps with Aristotle or even earlier, when people try to define an entity that is above their immediate surrounding. People always were curious about belonging and the way they define themselves towards the world, opposite to the world, together with the world. In my view, having in mind all this great scholarship that was published during many, many years, I would say that global citizenship is, first of all, about interconnectivity. The basic acknowledgement that we are part of something larger than our immediate surroundings. The second concept that I would like to bring on is about proactiveness. In my view, global citizenship is not only about being aware of the interconnectivity, being aware of the world outside of our specific environment. It's also about having the desire, but also the capability to change, to transform this world for the better of the human being. And perhaps the third issue that I would like to bring on into the discussion is about care. I believe that global citizenship and global citizenship education is about being able to care for others, whether they are humans around us, whether there are humans in remote and unknown places, but also about non-humans, the nature, the natural environment, and broader issues included climate change, responsible consumption, and all other things. So for me, if these three concepts are constituting global citizenship, then global citizenship education would be about instilling these ideas within the mind and hands of people and of young people, and getting them to understand, to appreciate, to practice, to initiate issues that are important for them, giving the fact that we all are interconnected, that we want to make them being caring about others humans and non-humans, and being proactive, being able to do something to change the situation.
Yeah, I think the humans and non-humans is a very important concept, interesting in terms of ethical values, in terms of really moving beyond this anthropocentric view that characterizes our humanity. And I think that's really interesting, and it connects to critical perspectives of global citizenship education, ethical perspectives as well. And in connection to this, I want to ask you how the notion of global citizenship is related to your journey as an educator and human being.
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is indeed a very personal and reflective one. And I was wondering, how come I only started to work on this issue for the last 5 years, where I was before? Because it's so deeply connected to who I am and who I am as a person and as a parent and as an educator. So I would say that the idea of global citizenship starts perhaps with the accusations that were held against Jewish community in the former Soviet Union during Stalin times. As a former Ukrainian citizen and a Jewish person, I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union, in the Ukraine. And during the years, my family and my relatives expressed deep anti-Jewish sentiments and anti-Israeli ones as well, when many times Jews were accused of being cosmopolitan, meaning not be able to really develop patriotic sense of belonging to a specific country, any country. And on the basis of this idea of belonging, my family eventually immigrated to the state of Israel as part of the Jewish diaspora. And here I was really surprised to find out that actually Jewish citizens from abroad really need to work hard to develop a sense of belonging to the state of Israel. It wasn't natural, or it wasn't as natural as I thought it will be.
Right.
And again, this feeling of being foreigner and being part of something bigger than you are, was always following me in all my decisions and in all my journey as a grown-up person. And then when I became an education professor at the university, these issues again of belonging and of proactiveness became very important in my life. I came to education, to the field of education, because I really wanted to make difference. It's not about writing and publishing another paper or presenting at a conference. I really naively perhaps wanted to change the world. And then again, this issue of what world we are talking about, what is the relevant community for us, how can we pursue peace and human rights and climate change issues within the community of educators, future teachers, also became very relevant when I'm struggling to define for myself, for my curricula, and for the outcomes that I'm expecting from my students, what global citizenship is. And I think, despite what I said before, I'm still struggling with this issue.
Right. I think is this dynamism of the concept of global citizenship is strongly related to the type of students that we want to foster as well. So there is a strong connection there, and I think you are right on this. And I want to ask you a next question in a way connected to your journey as an educator, the work you're doing, and the question is, what are some of the forthcoming projects and recent publications that you believe are core and you'd like to discuss and share with the audience, perhaps in connection to the conversation we are having today?
Sure. So I think that the main idea that I started this journey within the field of global citizenship education was to ask questions about equality. I usually look I usually explore the world from the sociological lens. So my main questions in my first line of research were related to this, whether educators and policymakers and curricula developers perceive that global citizenship education is relevant to all students, and who is included and who is excluded from this discourse. So this was basically the first huge bulk of publications that were studies that were executed in my group. And from that point on, I went to look a little bit more about policy-making processes and about how international organizations relate to global citizenship education in terms of international examinations and policy makings, and during COVID as well. And then in the last 2 years, I think, I started to look more into informal and non-formal opportunities for global citizenship education, and to connect this to broader discourses about parenting and about mobility. And again, mobility and global citizenship education, these two concepts are very much related, but they not necessarily mean the same thing. So my next project will focus on how basically globally mobile families educate their children, what kind of values they assume would be important, how they instill these values, what kind of educational practices and strategies and beliefs are there. And I want to look into families from different parts of the world to follow them and to understand better their rationales. And related to this, there is another project that is very interesting for me, is the point of view of the young people themselves, which are usually the supposed recipients of global citizenship education, but almost never they are the activators, and they are the agents that are responsible for it. So I would like to explore a bit more about how young activists and young people in general perceive these concepts, and in what kind of venues they are active, how they are active, why they are active. And I would like to perform some participatory studies that empower the learners themselves and enable them not only to be part of my research, of our research in that sense, but also to create the outcome of the research, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Very interesting. Yeah, I believe there has been a lot of research and literature around the teachers as agents of global citizenship, but not as students, as agents. So that might be a really interesting field to explore. And I'd like to ask you a core question, which in a way concludes this very interesting conversation with you, Miri. And the question is, how would you define global citizenship education using 3 keywords, and why these 3 keywords?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I kind of partly answered it during our conversation.
Yeah, you were mentioning.
But I would like to stress a couple of points. So my 3 words are the same 3 words that we started with, which is interconnectivity and care and proactiveness. And I chose these words because for me, they basically present all that is important in global citizenship education. So on one hand, it's interconnectivity, to understand that there are consequences to every local action that might be much broader than what we tend to believe, and they transcend borders and beliefs and people's lives. So this is about, we are all connected and interconnected. The second one is care. We really need to work with the future generations, but also with ourselves, to not forget, which is often quite an easy thing to do, that we are caring creatures, and we need to foster this feeling. And interconnectivity with care bring us to this third word, which is proactiveness, meaning it's not enough to understand and it's not enough to feel positive about something. We are expected to be active and proactive and not to perceive any situation as given, perhaps being capable or even believe and being capable in our capabilities to change. Perhaps even a small change will be important. And so the sum, the synergy of these three words, in my view, present the true nature of global citizenship education.
So we have interconnectivity, care, and proactiveness.
Indeed.
So the element of action, I believe, is very important. Praxis is also another interesting word that often comes up in this conversation. So I want to thank you, Miri Yemini, for joining this conversation on global citizenship education. It is a real pleasure to learn more about your line of work.
Thank you so much.